Anthony Seaman in pole position in the famous ex-Raymond Mays ERA R4D. A car with a tremendous history and totally unique insofar as it's the only D-type ERA in existence. Next to him on the front row of the grid, Bruce Spollen in R8C, the ex-Earl Howe car, independent front suspension once again, and a car indeed rebuilt after Branshaw Taylor's accident in the 50s only a short time ago. Behind, Martin Morris in R11B. Without the independent suspension, 2-litre engine, and recently having been rebuilt. And this is Brian Classic in R2A, the second ERA ever built for Humphrey Cook, the co-founder of ERA with Raymond Mays, a very early car indeed. Flanked behind it, Seaman's own car, in the hands of Duncan Ricketts, now owned by Sally Marsh, as they're away on the first of 10 laps, with uncertain skies. Incidentally, this also is one of the first appearances of an E-type in the Seaman Trophy, the light green car, in fact, going into Old Hall now. As normally is the case, an enormous number of ERAs turning out, together with many other interesting cars of the period. But immediately into the lead, on an ever-soaking track, is the ERA R4D of Anthony Seaman. Going through Falstons now, followed by, once again, 4 of these famous cars, and the Giron Alvis there, holding on to the next place, down towards Knickerbrook, and it's Seaman in the lead. Behind him, in second place, it's Bruce Spollen. In third place, Ludovic Lindsay's ERA. In fourth place, Martin Morris. Then Classic, Ricketts, and the Giron Alvis once again. Up the hill with the Alta next up behind, an ex-Jacka car. And in now towards one of the most difficult corners on the circuit, Druids Corner, and along the short straight that separates it from Lodge Corner. On a track of this type, with the circuit getting even wetter, the car's quite a handful. And feeding the power, a little bit of opposite lock there as Seaman comes out, followed by Spollen. And quite a battle going on there, as getting very sideways behind there was the black car of Brian Classic. The D-type front suspension, independent, the only one of its type, easy to spot there with the drill chassis, this particular chassis actually dating back to Ken Wharton's days with the cars. And the rain now coming down and making this track even more treacherous. Superb stable of historic cars Anthony Seaman runs, and the ERA, one of them now going as well as ever in his hands, and proving to be, as it should be really, the fastest of the ERAs around, with the possible exception of the E-type, which is yet to prove itself as a historic car, just in the same way as it would have had to have done so when it was new. All these cars having been built prior to 1939, the total production of ERAs, all but one car preserved, and that effectively replaced by a replica built up from spare parts. A spin there for Fiskin's Alvis, number 55. Crab track indicating that it has something called a GN chassis. And the ERAs, of course, built originally for the pre-war Voiturette formula, 1.5 litres supercharged, which after the war became the Grand Prix formula, together with 4.5 litre unsupercharged between 1946 and 1951, when they received a new lease of life in Grand Prix racing at that time. The Mays car was, of course, a works car. Martin Morris comes up there into second place. This was the car in which John Bolster had his huge accident at Silverstone many years ago, which effectively finished his racing career, as we look back again at Seaman with R4D. In the years prior to the Second World War, these cars having an immense amount of success on the continent as well as in UK, and after the war in Grand Prix racing, Bob Gerrard succeeding in bringing his car home, believe it or not, in third place in the British Grand Prix, the very first British Grand Prix held at Silverstone. Over the top of the hill, the B-type or A-type ERAs, very similar in construction, just slight differences in suspension, developed from the Riley engine, giving about 195 brake horsepower in their standard form. Lindsay with Remus, one of the ex-Beera cars, following the ex-Seaman car of Ricketts with a red-clad driver. Seaman's colours, as up comes now the Talbot in the race. This is Richard Pilkington. He and the Alvis behind, about to be lapped by the ERA in 2-litre form. These cars now being driven just as fast as they were when they were new indeed. The R4D car there of Seaman has gone up Shelsley Walsh, the place where Mays held the record, where Oulton held the record with this self-same car, faster recently than it has ever in its whole of its career. Little Riley's there with Humphrey about to attack one of them. Number 20, Bruce Spollen, C-Type ex-Lord Howe car, independent suspension again, similar to that of the D-Type ERA, but not perhaps quite so robust. And of course the solid rear end on the ERA Humphrey going through there of Martin Morris, and the same applying also to Duncan Ricketts in the ex-Seaman car there. This was the opposition that ERAs met in the 30s in Europe, cars like the Maserati there, another one following here, Peter Mann's ERA, and then the E-Type ERA, the last of the ERAs built, one in fact completed after the war. They were expected to be a great deal faster with their low-slung, more streamlined bodies and even more power, but indeed proved to be perhaps the most temperamental and the most difficult of cars. Only Peter Walker's car succeeding in really getting anywhere at all, and then on very rare occasions indeed. Bill Morris driving that car for Gordon Chapman, who owns both of the E-Type ERAs, the one made up from the third chassis, built Walker's chassis having been destroyed in an accident in the Isle of Man with a 4CL Maserati of Salvadores some years ago, in fact around about 1949, 1950. Dunham Alvis there under heavy pressure, or was it the Rover Special? There's the Alta, a car built by Geoffrey Taylor, and that particular car, number 24, a very quick example, Jay's Alta out to 2 litres. As we look back again at Seaman, you can see the driver having quite a hard ride there as he comes down the dip from Lodge Corner, up Clay Hill, past the pit area, reeling off the laps here on the track now, which is fortunately drying out a little bit. But Seaman, with the tail sliding a little bit there, coming up to take the checkered flag and win the Richard Seaman Historic Trophy Race for 1989. The first time, in fact, that R4D has ever won this very prestigious trophy, the biggest and the best historic race probably regardless of anything for pre-war cars in Britain and probably anywhere. Martin Morris second, he has won it before incidentally, Bruce Spollen third, Duncan Ricketts fourth, Jolly fifth and Brian Classic in 6th place. 5 ERAs in the first half dozen.